Hi everyone, this is the panel called What Now? And thank you for hanging out with us all day. I know it's Saturday and probably wanted to go outside and go in the pool or something, but we're so glad that you're joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Shannon in a second, but I just wanted to highlight that the awards ceremony is at 3 o'clock Eastern right after this. And we are honoring seven wonderful champions in this field of work, including Dr. Jennifer Montag, who's sitting right here, and I see her voice behind her. I love it. Okay, so Shannon, take it away, and good luck.
Thank you. All right, everyone, we're down to the last discussion here for the day. So, is it better now? I mean, are folks able to hear me okay audio wise? That was an issue earlier. Okay, cool. I discovered what it is if anyone ever runs into it. Zoom apparently just turns your volume down on its own for the input. So, if that ever happens to you, that is what happened to me. So, gonna go through intro and then we'll have a conversation here around this topic. So, thank you, as Ben said, for coming to the whole Stop the Stigma if you've been here, and especially now for the final conversation, of Stop the Stigma Conference, again, hosted by Moxie Educational Services and the community. My name is Shannon Ross. I am the founder of the community and as well as the consultant or a consultant for the McNeely Prison Education Consortium in Southeast Wisconsin, offering college degrees to those who are incarcerated and post-release. At Stop the Stigma, we acknowledge the importance of person first language because language shapes how we understand one another. Person first language centers humanity over diagnosis or system involvement and reflects our shared commitment to dignity, respect, and equity. We also recognize that individuals may prefer identity first language, and we encourage speakers and participants to honor personal preference whenever possible. We'd also like to begin with a land acknowledgement. Although this conference is held virtually, we acknowledge the indigenous peoples whose land we occupy as we gather, learn, and collaborate. The community is headquartered in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, on the traditional homelands of the Ho-Chunk Nation, the Menominee Nation, and the Potawatomi Nation, with enduring ties to the Ojibwe and the Odawa peoples of the Council of the Three Fires. Moxie Educational Services is based in New Hampshire on the ancestral lands of the Abenaki and Pennacook peoples, whose histories, cultures, and sovereignty continue today. We honor their resilience, ongoing contributions, and enduring relationship to the land. This acknowledgement is only a beginning. We encourage all attendees to learn about the indigenous nations whose lands they reside on and to support ongoing efforts toward indigenous justice and sovereignty. Accessibility is a shared responsibility as well. Thank you for helping create a conference culture rooted in respect, care, and openness. ASL interpreters are provided for each session and cart captions are activated. Now, to support blind and deafblind attendees, we'll begin with a brief visual description. I'll go first and invite each panelist to do the same. I'm a light-skinned biracial male with a close-cut beard and very short hair. I'm wearing a black hoodie with the community logo on the left chest, and my background is blurred. Interestingly enough, I am hiding out in my bathroom for my 4-year-old, who I'm hoping does not barge in behind me in the next hour. So that might pop up. I cannot promise. So the conversation we're talking about is what now? After all the conversations that have been had, all the panels, the great insights, the experience that was shared, what is going well, and how to be positive and hopeful going forward. So we have a couple topics and themes, and we're just going to toss them out amongst the group here and just kind of share our thoughts about each of those individual situations and concepts. So this weekend revealed about disability, it is not a peripheral issue in the justice system. It is central. Across film, research, lived experience, and policy, we saw how communication failures, stigma, race, mental health, and culture intersect to shape outcomes long before someone enters a courtroom or prison. The through line of all that is systems are not designed for disabled people, and the consequences are life-altering. So I'm curious, everyone here, Dr. Montag, Elizabeth, and Ben, what thoughts have come up in that regard over the course of the last couple of days, and even the work that you do?
So first we should go around giving our visual
Yes,
description.
as before you speak. Yes, before you speak,
So
definitely was your description. Yeah.
I am Ben Wright. I am a deaf male. I will be voicing for myself during this panel. But I have kind of a goatee and a black shirt with the community logo on it. And behind me is the I think this is beige. It looks yellowish, but my eyes are back. And a retro looking picture with some kind of weird looking lamp. Uh, that's the best I can describe it. John,
Hi, I'm Jennifer, and I am a white presenting female with dark brown hair that's very short. I am currently wearing a plaid jacket over over a black t-shirt and sitting in front of a brick fireplace with a mantle on which sits the award that um, I'm receiving today. So thank you. Elizabeth?
Sure. I'm Elizabeth Schatzel. I'm a white presenting female with brown curly hair. I have a dog in my lap who during my last panel did not appreciate being put in the other room. So I might be reaching for treats every once in a while to keep her occupied. And behind me is a dish cabinet, and I'm honored to be here. Shannon, can you repeat the question?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a bad segue between having to go back and forth. So yeah, so it's not so much a question; it's more of just a topic around the through line of the entire conference being systems are not designed for disabled people, and the consequences are life altering. So really, any thoughts or kind of questions, even yourself, that you have after all the conversations and panels we've had around that specific topic, that through line.
I was just going to say, I kept writing down, including the people who are most directly affected, is like one of the biggest things that hasn't been happening that we're starting to see happen. And then I think we need to really increase that. And the other one is getting access to communication and information. So how do we share that information, and how are we presenting it in a way that people can receive it and that they're able to use that information, whether it's for reentry, whether it's to get access to education, even just in their living space. So I think we're seeing where we were. We're hearing about what we're doing now. All of these panelists and speakers shared a lot of what's going on and what they're doing and how they're bringing people together. And I think this conference highlighted how we can all network together and build this system stronger.
um, one of my favorite parts of the conference is how every session connected with each other. It's almost like a sign link between them. And even though I made the schedule myself, I don't think it was conscious in my mind, really. Maybe down here in my subconscious somewhere. But, it just seems like everything really came together, especially like we started with Disability 101 and then we went into the courtroom and I realized, wow, they really intersect. And then it just kept going all the way down the line. So I was really impressed with the caliber of our presenters and the information that we put out there. And I think the biggest thing I took away from it was just having the conversation. And I think one reason that I'm gonna call you John for this panel, and I go back and forth between Dr. Montag and John, but I'm referring to Dr. Montag here. John and I, the reason we've been so successful is because we put ourselves out there. We, expose people to certain things. So that's what you guys did this weekend. Well, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I couldn't be more thankful, and I'm hoping that you guys really took away some ideas from that because we've had this conversation. And now we have to think about where are we gonna go next. So,
I'll just piggyback on that and say I think that the panels this whole conference have just been fire. Not only have they connected to each other and just built momentum, I think leading up to this final act, if you will, going on this play and movie theme. But I think they've really showed that how even as much as individual programs might be siloed, that there is a through line. There is a way forward, and there are solutions that are being used and tested and tried out in different spaces. And that if we as we go forward, really finding a space, whether it be here with the community, wherever it be, to have that people can continue these conversations so they're not so siloed. I think in our the last panel, S pointed out that the ADA has kind of been the dirty little secret of this space, and really outing that this intersection impacts all of us, regardless if we live at the intersection of accessibility needs or not. I would almost argue that that it now becomes our onus, because we've all been here at this panel, because we have been working in this space, because the field has moved in this trajectory, that the next step is to create that space where we can identify what has worked and what needs to be taken to the next step. So really becoming solution-minded individuals. We know that the system's not designed for people. It works exactly the way that it was intended to work, to keep people oppressed in the way that it is and controlled. And the consequences being life altering have manifest not only in the stories you've heard over this weekend, but in the lives of the people that you serve around you. The next step is like, let's get together and talk about the solutions that have worked and where we need to still focus.
And all of that is like exactly what I think things that I've had thoughts about, and what a lot of the comments and the threads have highlighted, the networking especially. And the area that I mentioned in the very beginning of the conference, that these types of conversations slowly build towards and start to build momentum if done collectively in a way that has alignment, is this element around the narrative. Like, we have so many people that even in this space don't understand this aspect of it. Yeah, I think I've admitted to Ben before Ben joined and like really got us to see this as a thing that we need to be aware of in our work. It wasn't something I was really thinking about so much, right? And so it was a blind spot. And so this conversation leads to more conversations, leads to people bit by bit starting to, who are in positions of leadership or in positions of starting their own thing. It creates that narrative of like momentum that starts to get out there, and that's how you get to have the better policies. It's like the conversations happening in a constructive way, not just the knowledge, not just the arguments, not just the policies, but people have to know why it matters, right? Because before you can actually engage in a solution, you have to understand the importance of why there's a problem. So that's what I think comes to mind when I was looking at this question, this theme. The next topic kind of segues off of a comment someone made above in the chat here. I think it was Tamara, was kind of talking about things that are not going on that can't be accepted anymore, right? So from due process to medical care, from education to reentry, we heard example after example of structural neglect. Miscommunication, misdiagnosis, and misinterpretation of disability continue to be treated as individual problems rather than systemic failures. The questions now shift from how did this happen to what practices can no longer be excused and which sit first. So what kind of comes up for you all when those two questions arise?
I'm going to jump in because I have a lot of thoughts, but I think for me, when we talk systems, I would love to stop that school to prison pipeline. Um, what are we missing in that K-12 setting, in that system that is contributing to so many individuals entering into the correctional system, whether as juvenile or as an adult. And tied to that is right now what we're seeing is an increase in the making disability part of the criminal justice system, meaning people with disabilities oftentimes are, because of their behaviors, because of their disability, are being are interacting with the legal system, with the law enforcement so often, and that can oftentimes just spin right out of control and into the correctional system. So those would be the two things that I think preventatively I would love to see happen. At the point where we are right now, working to fix the systems that we have, The one thing which Ben can tell you, I've said at every training that we've done, every time I get a chance to say it, is if you're doing educational programming, especially if you're a higher education institution, bring your disability service office along with you. Don't make this an afterthought. Bring us along because we can help fix things before you even build it. So those are the three things that I would say. Prevent it. And since we're here now, work with us.
I'm letting Elizabeth go.
Okay. So me and you were like on the edge there. Who goes first? Okay. Um, Practices that can no longer be excused. Um, I'm going to return to student-centered voices. So the classroom changes every time someone new is introduced. Sometimes it changes the same body of students the next day or the same environment. And so I think the biggest practice that I would bring to the forefront here is that acknowledging that nothing is done in isolation and also that nothing is the monolithic experience. And that translates to every classroom experience you have. Again, so much is already put on educators' plates to take care of, but I think developing a environment where we include the who, what, when, where, how of the spiritual, emotional, intellectual, physical experience of those people in our classroom are acknowledged every time we step into that classroom. I think if we look at teaching and learning not just as a singular experience, but as one that is continuously changing and flexible, innately will have ears open to hear things that we might be blind to see or hear. And I think the practice that can no longer be excused is the dependence on a set curriculum. When that curriculum, even if we in the field wrote it, that curriculum needs to be able to be altered and changed in real time with the folks that you're serving in real time. And that's asking a lot for people who already have a lot on their plate. It's a time commitment, it's an intentionality commitment. So I think that the biggest thing that can no longer be excused is that our blindness to intention, and also our bias that we are being intentional when maybe we're not. I think that a practice that really needs to be looked at is each of us individually and program wide, really being honest about where we are blind and where we are lacking in ability to see what we can't see. And sometimes that includes bringing in somebody from outside of our organization. I think often in doing this good work, sometimes we unintentionally do harm to do good. And really acknowledging that no one should suffer the brunt of the hierarchy of experiences or the hierarchy of oppressions and be left out of the conversation. And that's a big ask, but it's something that can't be excused as we move forward.
There are a lot of elements here, and sometimes when you think about each element, it's hard to try to put them together. Like Elizabeth talked about how things don't happen in isolation. But throughout this conference, we talked about, K to 12 and the juvenile gap studies this. And if the foster care system is not up to par, if they're not providing, foster care and just medical care and psychological care, being able to get that diagnosis from an early age, then things start compounding on each other and start manifesting into a possible disability later on, which just keep overlapping on each other. And then it goes to the courtroom, and then it goes to parole and probation, and before, during, and after. On Thursday, we got the opportunity to watch the film documentary called Being Michelle, And I was telling, I think, John, how it really resonated with me because it reminded me of so many of my students that I've had over the years. And I have a unique perspective because I was a teacher, then I was incarcerated, and then I was more on an administrative point of view. So it keeps changing, but I've seen all of it. And when I went into the prison, and there were about 30 deaf guys there, deaf plus other disabilities, I couldn't help but see all my students in them. And it was really heartbreaking when that happened. And I am fortunate to have language. I am fortunate to have knowledge. I am fortunate to have a good support system. So I was different, if you will, when I was in the prison. But day after day, I would hear stories about, uh, foster care, about drugs, about addiction, about not getting IEP services, not getting diagnosed for this or that. Um, Being molested, telling a counselor, and the counselor telling them can't do anything about it because we don't have an interpreter to help you out. Those kind of things that just keep popping up. And then we start being Michelle, and it's like it just popped up in me. So when you ask the question of what needs to be stopped, I think Jen was right on point. It needs to start from the beginning. And what I always say when Johnny and I travel and speak at conferences is we need to be proactive, not reactive. Reactive means you do something after the fact. Like for instance, if you are incarcerated, you have a wheelchair, you end up at a facility, the facility says, well, we're putting a ramp next year, or whatever. It costs a lot of money to put in a ramp. Put in a ramp before you anticipate somebody coming. The same thing with the foster care system, same thing with the school system, same thing with diagnosis, same thing with a lot. So there's so much trauma happening here, and it just makes me think about how can we help how can we help people who have that much trauma? And how can we avoid the conversation of, it's too late? You don't want to hear that. It's too late to help them. And somebody said that to me about Michelle and being Michelle. It's probably too late to help her because, she's too old. And she's already experienced all that trauma. And so we can't wave our magic wand and go back to when she was a kid and provide more communication access, unfortunately. But I basically, I guess everything that I've said kind of all over the place, but it all comes back to just exposure and thinking about each other, caring about each other, and thinking about how you can be proactive and not reactive. Everything that Elizabeth stands for, everything that Jan stands for, and even everything that Shannon stands for, it's all about being proactive and not reactive. And sometimes I feel like certain organizations are hesitant to be proactive, not reactive, because it costs more money, they don't have enough staff, all these things. But as you saw in the higher education panel, Hanan from Washington is a perfect example of how we can roll up our sleeves and try to figure it out because it's never too late.
Thank you, Ben. The topic for me makes me think of infrastructure, which I guess no surprise if you know me, I'm very big on. How do we bring the groups doing the work together? How do we create byways and highways and connective points between all the organizations doing this? Sometimes I feel like we're just, this small army with sticks and rocks against these huge monsters. And if we just work together, we could actually, start to maybe have some equality against the powers that we're addressing. And individually, it's just so easy for them to continue to, overcome what we're trying to present. And so ways that we can, in working around the disability work, around incarceration work, around whatever systems to improve and empower marginalized populations is just how can we create better connectivity, even if it's just to two other organizations, like because then somebody else can come and they have two other organizations. And so again, like there are different ways to do it. I know it's kind of a vague concept without details that I'm saying, but there are ways to do it. And I just ask people always to really think about how you can Voltron and create a larger version of yourself with working together for the infrastructure to be better. So it's not just siloed individual efforts, because it's a large effort that we're trying to make right now. And the other thing is something that Elizabeth said for me, which is kind of a good segue to the next question. It's around ourselves. Are we like being self-aware, right? How are we addressing this? And so the topic that I wanted to kind of bring up next is race, disability, LGBTQ plus identity, geography, technology, access, all compound vulnerability, right? The stories shared, especially through Being Michelle and Brick by Brick, made visible the emotional and human cost that data alone cannot capture. Art, testimony, and lived experience challenged us to reconsider our roles. So the question for the group on this is, are we helping, witnessing, or unintentionally upholding harm in the work that we're doing at times? So I'm curious kind of what thoughts come up for everyone here on that topic.
I'll jump off by also pointing to something that Jen dropped in the chat. She dropped in the chat that we've had 36 years now to bring institution, organizations, communities, environments to accessibility, because the ADA was signed with bipartisan support in 1990. So when I think about helping, witnessing, or unintentionally causing harm, or maybe intentionally causing harm, because that allows some access to resources. If we're going to be honest here, sometimes we intentionally cause harm to move forward, whether that's ethically or morally right or wrong. I think accountability comes into question here, both with the 36 years that this has been law and not been fully enacted in a way, and also within our organizations and across our communities, right? How do we hold each other accountable to making things accessible? I think we grapple with this question in this field a lot around who's in the room having the conversation, around how we talk about each other and talk about ourselves in language and intentionality. I think we talk about it and we show up for it in like quality versus quantity of what services we're providing. But we lack that when it comes to ADA accessibility and or these intersecting identities, whether it be race, disability, LGBTQ plus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's really important that we as a community going forward set up some sort of accountability metric and then hold each other to that space. All good communities set good barriers, right? We have spaces where we can go and we can have those really open and honest conversations about what we need to do different and how we're falling short. But you still have to have a metric by which that's measured. And so I would argue that that sometimes I have helped, sometimes I have witnessed, and sometimes I have both unintentionally caused harm and purposely caused harm in my work. And I think that not to be malicious about it, but just to move whatever mission it is that I'm working on forward. And I wish there had been a standard of accountability metrics whereupon other people in this field or other people outside of this field had the power to say, hey, you agreed to this accountability metric. How can we build that? And so that's a question that I would push out to this greater community as we move forward. Like, how can we build that?
Then, Dr. Montag, any thoughts you have there?
I think to go off of what Elizabeth shared, I think part of that accountability is actually asking questions. And I put it into the chat. I know that in my past lifetime, there have been times that I've had to follow the standard policy or the institutional policy. But it didn't sit well with me because I was like, that doesn't really work for this situation, or it's going to harm the student more. Or why did we set that policy? So being able to, when you have the voice and when you can, because we all understand there are times that we can't without irreparable harm to ourselves or our families. But when you have the opportunity, especially if you're not directly impacted, but you're an ally, to stand and ask the question that nobody else is asking. Why is that policy written that way? Is there a way we can change that policy so that more people can get access and we're not gatekeeping? I think that's one avenue that we might want to start looking at. How can we build that out, and how can we help support others in learning to ask those questions and ask, why is that policy that way?
Anything you're thinking about, Ben, on the topic?
I got distracted by Andrew's comment in a good way. It made me think a little bit dirty, and I don't want to tell it for her. But I feel like this is a perfect opportunity if she willing to relate to what Andrew is saying in the chat. So I'm going to defer my time to Elizabeth if you want.
Oh, let me go see what he said in the chat. I was responding to the Voltron creation
So I'll read it out loud.
and challenging Stacy to
When I
create
came
a
to
look.
prison
Yeah, read it, please.
when I
For
came to
accessibility.
prison at 21, I couldn't read, write, or spell. I had to teach myself from scratch, studying books, reading letters from family and friends, and spending hours with the dictionary. I wrote as many as 6 letters back to back each week, practicing every chance I got. I have to admit, prison forced me to grow up. It pushed me to learn, to reflect, and to change. Before my arrest, I was heading down a dark road. Being locked up made me confront that. Thank you for sharing, Andrew. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm deferring
Thanks.
my time to Elizabeth.
Hmm. Oh, put me on the spot. That's okay. This is what happens when people know you personally. Um, that's okay, right? That's what we're here for. For those of you who don't know, I went into the carceral system at a very young age as a juvenile, and did quite a bit of time. But when I went in, I had a 5th grade education level. So Andrew, I can really relate to you. And because of my length of time, I was not allowed to have access to the educational services that were provided inside until much later in my incarceration in my 20s. And in my 20s, a law changed in Virginia that unintentionally helped those of us who had the intersection of foster care and incarceration in our lives in Virginia. And there was the law said that if you were ever in foster care in your life or in that system of child protection services that you were under 23, that you had the right to be reevaluated for learning disabilities. Prior to that, I had never had been tested for learning disabilities. And there was a woman who is named Geraldine Hayden, and I will always forever be grateful for her intervention in my life in that time because she had me tested. And I am one of only a few people that fell into that group of folks who were incarcerated that then had the access to the diagnostic tools to find out why they couldn't learn or to be provided space in an education space when we had such a large amounts of time to do inside of the system itself. What that showed was that I did have learning disabilities, both ED and LD, and I was also on the spectrum for autism. I can speak to you now. Back then, I could not speak to you. I would just want to either fight you or hug you. There was no in between in communication style. But what that access did, though, was allow me to take my first class, and it took me 3 years to finish my first college class, and it took me 10 and a half years to finish my first associate's degree. One was grappling with those intersections of learning disabilities, and environment and growing up in that space. The other was access to resources, because I did have such a lengthy sentence. My entire degree had to be self-pay. And so when you're making 27 cents an hour, or hustling to get money to pay for school, that's a different experience than most people now experience when school is provided at no cost, as it should be. I say all this to say that my experience, and I will say now that I have 9 degrees. I am actively planning to go to a master's program in the fall, and that I have worked both nationally and internationally on multiple research projects and in speaking engagements. I've been to over 40 conferences in the last year, speaking about why access to these things is important. That's not an experience that should be confined to just me, because I was one of 3 or 4 people that had access to a diagnostic tool. I would argue that moving forward, and I hope this is what you were trying to get to, Ben, is that if everyone had access to those diagnostic tools, if everyone inside of these systems had access to a teacher that asked or pushed a little bit harder for them to know what they need in that moment to be able to learn, or to be able to
Do you like
benefit from
grapefruit?
services, then but you would have a multitude of folks that are just like the people on this panel that have overcome difficulties and been given that. I always say that the most why don't we try to make everyone inside of the justice system a doctor? We have a shortage of doctors, you know. I think so. When we talk about solutions and moving forward, it's not that I was very privileged to be at that intersection that had the access to those things that then allowed me to grow in education, and show me those invisible doors. But there's still other invisible doors that are out there. And we who have worked in this field, and we who can call to light these injustices, now have the responsibility to show those invisible doors to the folks that are around us, and to continuously ask, what doors are we not looking at? Ben, I hope I have done you justice in your prompting and ways that we can move forward in the system. And Andrew, thank you for your experience. Growing up inside the system is hard, and that work is day by day.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, it's really, I think, I feel gratitude to have stories that are shared that are sometimes not as comfortable to hear, but the amount of lessons that I've learned from people's stories that are the most troubling for them is, for me, something I always try to think of when I'm trying to share something that maybe, isn't comfortable for me. So I appreciate that, moment, and that I recognize, the experience you had. Is there anything, Ben, that you want to have, like, anything else on this topic before? I know you offered your time, as you said, to Elizabeth. Anything else you had as a thought before we kind of go to the final topic?
No, that's my answer.
Okay.
She did it. The reason I did that,
Right.
I don't like putting people on the spot, but I knew she'd be okay with it. That blew me away, so I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm ready for the next question.
So our final, conversation here for the panel to discuss and share any insights on is responsibility, accountability, and the path forward. The final shift is from awareness to action in anything, and what commitments should institutions make? What can each attendee do in the next 30 days? What partnerships must exist that don't yet? And ultimately, what does courage look like in disability justice work? And who are we accountable to when we leave here? So does anything come up from that topic for the group?
So, for those of you that don't know, I think most of you do, but those of you that don't know, Jennifer, Mantak, and myself got a grant a while back for $200,000, which we are extremely grateful for. And then we have successfully achieved another 150,000 on top of that. And the reason I share that number is because the project is about disability aspects in prison education, and the fact that the foundation were willing to provide funding for that is phenomenal, landmark, it's groundbreaking. That's the word I was looking for, groundbreaking. And I'm just so proud of it. And I'm proud of everything that Johnny and I do. So what we are doing is we are making a training manual for programs like the Department of Corrections, like universities, um, community partners that work with them, ABE, GED, and vocational programs as well. And we're also working on a 10 module course that will be online. The training manual will be like a written version, and then the online version would be like a typical course that you take online. I'm sure most of you have experienced that before. And our goal is to teach and educate people out there how to do quite a few things, such as how disability services can partner up with the university, how we can accommodate for students, what accessibility needs are present, how do we work with the DOC in terms of what technology can go inside and what can, and if they say no, okay, what can we do now? Johnny and I have had the honor and the privilege of working with 36 different states and at least 2 programs in each state. And the reason I'm talking about this is because that's what you should do in the next 30 days. If you are not connected to our project, you should be. And S. Perkanowski from Ithaca will be doing a survey.
Stepanowski.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that name got out there. I'm not good at saying Archie, and Archie's name has what, 5 Archies in it? So anyway, from Ithaca, we'll be working on a survey studying disability in the prison system and accommodations that they receive. So we are working together on that, and I'm really excited about that. But that's what I would do in the next 30 days, because that is something that we can work with you on. We can send you our training manual when it's done and provide technical assistance as you need it. You met Robin here from Michigan, you met Hanan from Washington, you met Tamara from New York, you met Elizabeth, you met Chip Taylor last night, you met so many people. I could go on and on. Almost everyone, I think, is involved in our project in some way, shape, or form. Honestly, just by being here, you're part of the project, right? But reach out to us. It could be me, it could be John. As you witnessed the last 3 days, John is a boatload of information. All you have to do is ask you something, and she'll just talk to you for an hour about it, any topic. I remember once we were traveling, and I wanted to talk about Shakespeare, and she just starts quoting Shakespeare out of nowhere. It's like this endless boat of knowledge that she has. So definitely reach out to John if you are of any need, because what it's all about is networking. That's the entire point of this conference to me, is giving the voice back to you guys and connecting in as much as we can. So the community and Moxie and other organizations that have been involved, like Jobs for the Future, who's really involved with this conference. We had Ithaca, we had Joyce Story, we had the University of Puget Sound, we had so many different organizations involved this weekend. I keep saying weekend, this conference. That's what you can do. Connect with each other, network, and email me or Jennifer Montag. And you can do it, Shannon. He admitted that he didn't know all that much when we studied, and now he's a boatload of knowledge. I keep saying boatload. I wonder why. Anyway, not to put Shannon on the spot, and I do put people on the spot every once in a while, but I wrote the other day, deaf and deaf blind, and he said to me, shouldn't it be deaf and blind? And I got to educate him in that moment about how culturally you say deafblind. So the opportunities like that, exposing and stuff, learning new things. That's where you start, and that's what you should do tomorrow. Email each other. If not, me and Jen, email your community partners, email who you work with, contact them. Get out there. You're not going to change anything just by sitting in your room and doing nothing. That's why I feel I'm successful. That's why John's successful. Quite frankly, that's why both Elizabeth and Shannon have been successful, because they put themselves out there. They are not afraid to voice things. Often people ask me, how do you do this? How do you make a conference? How do you know, that kind of stuff. Really, it's just by talking to people. So,
Thank you. Any thoughts, Elizabeth or Dr. Montauk?
What was the question again?
Basically, what can you put it in the chat? Actually, you highlighted
Okay.
like pretty much answered in the chat a bit. What does courage look like in disability justice work? Who are we accountable to when we leave? What are things that people can do that are attendees next 30 days? What can systems do? Just kind of next step takeaways.
So as I put into the chat, really making those connections, like Ben said, it's really important at the college level, and I'm saying college generally, community college, technical college, universities, connect with your disability services office, connect with your higher education and prison program, create a unified front, um, so that you can ask for the things that need to be asked for, either from the DOC level or from your college's administrators. Reach out to the DOC, figure out who to talk to, who's the ADA coordinator. Um, that's really important. So really making those connections is the action step I'm asking people to do. How to be brave. I I have lived since I realized I had a voice and I could use that voice. I've actually lived with the mantra truth to power. And within the ADA and Section 504, I have truth. That is the truth. That is the legal requirements. So when I'm talking to those who hold power in the institutions, I am speaking the truth to them. I am bringing forth, this is what we need to be doing. And so it's made me stronger and braver. It's just recognizing, where does your power lie, so that you can ground yourself in it and then move forward with what you need to have happen that will change the system or improve the situation.
Thank you.
Can I add to that real quick? I want to say that this truth to power idea is that throughout this conference, there has been so many resources and links and reports and research that has been like offered. Um, and so I think, like, if I was to say, what can you do in the next 30 days to be accountable, is go get some truth. So empower yourself with the data that's out there, so that way when you are speaking to these systems, or you are trying to move forward in greater access to accessibility, you have the statistics, you have the data, and you have the places to point people to go to. It is wonderful to walk into a room with good intentions, but if you don't have those facts to back it up, the folks that are in power will dismiss you, and it'll do harm to this work better rather than help. I would say that. Yeah.
For my comments on this topic, the thing I think about is the accountability element at the very end of the various questions there. And the question comes up for me a lot of times of like, why do you do this work? I think for some of us, there's an ability to kind of shift into regular society and just disappear. And for whatever reason, I think S made a comment earlier about once you've seen the elephant, you can't unsee it. And my spirit is just moved that way. I can't unsee the thing that I've experienced and the path to have the opportunities and blessings that I've been given. I can't claim any reason for that. It's complete luck, right? And so for me, that holds space as an obligation within my spirit. And I feel accountable to those who have caused that for me and for those who I'm in position now to open that up or limit in the future. So the past and the future are who I feel accountable to. And I think that grounding helps a lot of times for us to just navigate a lot of the difficulties in the present that come up and why we do this work and why it's so important. So that would be my add-on to the various great insights that have been provided. Well, that's the last thing that we have to talk about as our conversations. Does anyone else have anything that they want to talk to before kind of finalizing to get into the award ceremony? Any of the three of you?
There were some questions. I haven't read them yet.
There, yeah,
Hopefully we
there's
answered
two questions
that.
about reentry, correct. Yeah. I don't know if we are the best. I know there were other panelists that might be better for that. Does anyone want to, we have a question around how do we help people with disabilities inside and outside into reentry with limited resources? And how do we stand up for people with disabilities in the system and outside world without breaking their feelings? Which is an interesting, I don't know if I fully understand that one, but I think I do. So any thoughts on either of those from the panel?
I can address a little bit about the reentry,
Okay.
especially from the field of disability. Connecting to the community resources is going to be critical. And I hate to say it, and I know, Danny, you're way up in northern Wisconsin. I'm originally from Wisconsin. I know the area you're talking about, it's like 20 miles of forest to get to the next town. Um, that being said, working with the community's local independent living center, I can't say that enough. You'll see that I've been saying it all day, because they have 5 core services. They have information and referral, systems and individual advocacy, peer support, independent living skills training, and transition to the community. And there are some really strong centers for independent living that have been doing transition, not just K-12 from high school to the community, but they're also looking at transition from nursing homes into the community, from other settings like the correctional setting back into the community. So that is one opportunity. And there's a lot of ways that they can support with information, referrals, helping even just to learn more about disabilities and accessibility. Some communities have a Center for Independent Living that will actually do um, an assessment for accessibility in the community. They usually have a charge for it, but part of that is how do you figure out the funding for it? And is there a grant in the community, like from a community foundation, that can help in bringing in an assessment for the community for access or assessment of the community reentry tools by the Center for Independent Living for accessibility, and then looking at how do we build this better? How can we keep moving forward but bring more people in by making sure it's accessible? So that's my thought. It's all about collaborating with what resources are out there. And then I saw in the chat earlier today, we were talking about there's a lot of communities that are building in, like Shannon's um, resource guide for the reentry. That is fabulous. And I'm going to keep asking you, Shannon, can we get that, like connect everybody's reentry guide for their community as a national resource on a database that I can go to? If I get a contact from somebody in California, I can click your database and go, hey, look at here, here's California. That would be phenomenal. So that's the way I see this reentry. There's so much more that we can do, but it's just, we have to do it in bite-sized pieces, but we do it all together. If you take one bite and you take one bite and I take this bite, we can probably move this ball forward.
Yeah, keep asking. We're definitely working that way, so definitely keep asking. I think I'm gonna hand it over to Ben for the last question by Danny. If there's anyone here that you think would be a good person to specifically reach out to about an answer on that, I don't think we have the time to kind of go into it. And I don't want to answer because I'm not sure I fully understand what you're asking, but it's an interesting conversation. So that's going to be my request, unfortunately, for now. And I'm going to hand it over to Ben, and thank you, Dr. Montauk, thank you, Elizabeth, and Ben for creating space for this and for giving me an opportunity to kind of be a part of it. So thank you.
Yes,
Thank you,
Johnny
Ken.
had Elizabeth's email and also my email, and I believe Jennifer's email as well. So he can email all three of us if he wants to. Thank you, everyone. That was a wonderful panel.